All right, so has anyone seen that video? It's probably been out for a little while. I'm new to it. I had never seen it, and I think Jordan himself makes the best point when he says, we have it linked down here in the description too. So click on that link in the comments, go find out, see it for yourself if you have not seen it. But in there, Michael Jordan says, what is the GOAT? Who is the best of all time? And he says, that's not even the topic. The topic should be, what is the best team of all time? And a lot of times we don't even think about that. We talk about that with football, right? Everyone goes to the Miami Dolphins, the undefeated season. The Patriots came so close. But then the Belichick teams that did win championships, so were some of the best teams ever. 6 Super Bowls in all those years. So when it comes to basketball, what is the greatest team of all time, as Jordan does? And in the video, he goes over all his championships. And he says, hey, come at me. If you got a better team, let me know. It's hard to really argue with them with that fact, right? When you do pick players, it does rely on teams. In any sport, it's hard. It's hard to say Patrick Mahomes is the GOAT. Well, go put him on the Jacksonville Jaguars 2 years ago. I still think he's good. I still think he would put up great numbers overall, but he's not going to get the praise that he would get being in a situation with Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs and Travis Kelce and everything else with that franchise and that organization. So when it comes to team things, we have to basically that's why I don't like the individual as much. How Scottie Pippen, we covered that in one of our videos recently, how he said he doesn't believe you can't really put a GOAT in a team game. So let's put that to bed and let's go. Like Jordan said, what are some of the most amazing teams ever? Now, I didn't do any research for this. That's why I'm not really going to go back to anything that was predated to me. I started watching basketball in the mid to late 80s as a kid, and then in the 90s were my big years and absolutely fell in love. But when you go back, we do have to give props to almost every Celtic team right before with Bill Russell, 11 championships. You got to think Jerry West. Now, the crazy thing is you had Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, and I think dang it, who's escaping me? There was 3. How can I not remember? Was it not Elgin Baylor? Either way, that Laker team had some real talent, and I think they only got 1 championship. When you put someone like the logo and 100-point man, Wilt Chamberlain, and only get 1 championship, that just tells how good the league was. So I'm not going to go back to all those teams because I don't really know too much other than just seeing documentaries or things like that on it or looking it up. What I do know is, to me, some of the best teams, as we try to, will we rank them? I think we'll kind of talk about a few of them and then push aside and come with our top 3 or so. But you got to go Showtime with Magic. And Jordan even says, oh, this was Showtime Lakers, sorry. Well, come on, that was Showtime Lakers at the very end of its run. Magic was hobbling just to get through. Your second best player might have been what? Was it AC Green? And if he was there, and then Vlade Divac. So, but still, Lakers won the West. Jordan, props to him winning. That is not the Showtime Lakers we're talking about. We're talking about one that had Byron Scott, James Worthy, Big Game James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the captain. I've even had people talk about on our channel when we were talking about LeBron and Jordan, how is he not talked about? I think because he came from that era, and right when the NBA was picking up with the Showtime, everything was still Magic and Bird, so he gets forgotten when he shouldn't. I mean, he had the most unstoppable shot, the skyhook. So when you have an unstoppable shot, when you're the all-time points leader, and we're not even getting into his dominance in college. Did he ever even lose a game? I think maybe he lost 1 or none in college. That's insane with UCLA and Wooden. All the accolades, all the awards, I think he won with the Milwaukee Bucks, and then he won multiple ones with the Lakers before he finally hung it up. That team right there where you had the captain, you had Magic Johnson, of course, and I talked about James Worthy, and then they traded for Michael Thompson. Remember, he was like the first overall pick, and they ended up trading him, and he was just a bench piece. That's how deep the NBA was when you have those kind of players on there in that roster. Everyone remembers Goggles, Kurt Rambis. He was one of those fire plugs that you needed on a team, and then you get to the the Celtics, where you had McHale, you had Parrish, you had Larry Bird, you had. Sometimes that's what I'm saying. Some of the guys escape me. Danny Ainge, there we go. You had players on there that, man, what an incredible time. Most people who are going to probably watch this or comment on it, they know those 2 teams, Larry Bird and Magic, when they came, they saved it. The NBA used to be on tape delay. It was on tape delay. That's how bad the ratings were. You would have live news or other things on before the NBA even came on. Those guys saved the NBA. And that's why for people like me as a kid, I didn't even know what it was, and my dad's friend was watching, and I'd watch it over there, and I got into it, and next thing you know, I'm enjoying watching basketball, when before I wouldn't even give it was only baseball. That's all I was into. So when you look at those teams, you have to start there. Do I think either of those teams are better than any of the Chicago Bulls teams? We'll stick a pin in that. We'll keep those two there, and we'll get back to the Bulls. The next one is the Detroit Pistons, the Bad Boys. Now, they only had 2 titles. But just like similar to Jordan, the Pistons had to go, and it was weird how you had this, if you remember in the NBA. You would have these teams to where they would get up there, and they were really good, and they made it to the top of the mountain, Celtics and Lakers, and then you had other teams that were just right there, nipping at their heels, and they could not overcome them. And in the end, a lot of times, in those type of leagues, because you didn't have a bunch of free agency and moving and things like that, you would gradually catch them. And you, in my opinion, you didn't really catch them because you got better. You caught them because you were still good. And in your prime, the other teams were coming down with age. I think that's what ended the Celtics run, was age. And it happens to everybody. But it brought them down. And as they did that, the Pistons, who had kind of like in the pecking order, they finally got up there. Bill Laimbeer, Dennis Johnson, Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman. I mean, that's some good, that is a good roster, the people on there. So when you look at that and you go, man, and that was one of the teams that kept the Bulls down. Now, we do know that the Bulls did not have the team yet. They got Phil Jackson. We talked about Craig Hodges. We talked about Bill Paxson. Getting Scottie Pippen was the biggest key. Having Horace Grant. At one time, I think Jordan, I don't know if he was on there then. Charles Oakley. I can't remember. He was really good with Jordan. You don't remember back in the NBA then, you would knock guys out. And that's, we've seen one quick point on our channel. People have put that a lot in the LeBron and things, saying, oh, in the back then, LeBron, if he would have went down, he would have got knocked out by Bill Laimbeer. That you can't put him, if he played in that time, and as big as LeBron is, he probably wouldn't have been as big, because it's different era where they work out and get bigger at such a young age. I mean, you didn't see guys like that back then. So you can't even put him there. If you brought him, so if you did, I think LeBron would have said, hey, I know what I got to go up against. So you grow up in that time. So I never like eras comparing. I've never been a fan of that. You just can't do it. And so with this, but Jordan had to go against that, right? So as he came up, the Pistons were here. The Bulls started to improve, and they just couldn't get to that level. You had the Celtics, you had the Pistons. It is different in this NBA. It's different than it was than it is now. As you saw, LeBron, 8 straight finals. Even if you say, hey, you know what, that wouldn't have happened in that day. It wouldn't have. It wouldn't have. We never saw anybody go 8 straight finals in the 80s or even 90s like that, because you physically cannot take it, especially with teams like the Bad Boys and how fouls were, how they were taking your heads off. How, I liked it. I liked seeing the Pistons, how physical it was. And it was like, man, that's a sport. That's basketball. Then you get things now where you see, you're like, dude, he barely nicked his head, and that's a flagrant. So it's comical when you see nowadays compared to back then. But it changes. You still have, all you can do is take what's in that era. And so the team right there with the Pistons, nowadays you wouldn't see, like how the NBA is now, you don't see teams try to gradually have to almost leapfrog, jump up and say, okay, I finally surpassed them, I got to take them. And then age brings them down. It's not like that anymore. So let's just go back to the 80s. So the Pistons, they jumped up there. They got 2 titles. And the Bulls could not get by him. And then finally, I don't know if age did them in. Maybe. It was also the fact that the Bulls Jordan was coming in. Pippen was finally showing up. He better than his first year. And they had the team. They had the coach. And it was just their time. I mean, honestly, I think if the Pistons were in their prime, I still think the Bulls would have beat them. That's why I'm going to put the Pistons still really good, right? They get forgotten, I think, with the Lakers and the Celtics. And in the West, if you think, I mean, the Trailblazers, the Spurs, the Jazz, those were some really good teams, but they were kind of like the Bulls and all the other teams. They could not overpass the juggernauts of the East. And also, one thing, less teams. I've told my kids that. I'm like, you look at some of these rosters back then when you would say, hey, there's 20 teams in the league. You're getting some of the best athletes. Your number 7 or 8 is probably a starter nowadays with the 30 teams in the league. It's like, it's not even close. the league gets so diluted. You add so much water to the drink that when you take a drink, you don't even have any flavor. And that's kind of like what the NBA is now. That's why you got these teams where it's like, man, if you don't get a superstar, you're in trouble, because it's you either want to be the really good or really suck. You don't want to be somewhere in the middle because you make no progress. So back to it with the Pistons, I would put them one of the top teams in the 80s. But even one of their title runs, what was it? Who was hurt? Magic Johnson was out. I'm trying to remember if Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or James Worthy. They had multiple guys injured. That Laker team was nowhere near what the elite team they were. So it's kind of like when Toronto won their championship where the Warriors were not 100%. So you got to give it to them still. They did get to give it to the Pistons, but then the Bulls came up and beat them. And from that point on, you didn't really see anyone in the West that was a real dynamic threat. The Lakers were pretty much done. They had a few remnant pieces left, but they were done. From the West, what do you think of then? You think of the Jazz that could never get it done, regardless. Even when Jordan was gone those years, they couldn't get past. The Rockets finally came up. When I think of post-Jordan retirement the first time, all I think about is the Rockets, because they won back-to-back titles, and they, with Clyde Drexler, who couldn't get it done in Portland. That was another one. The Pistons did beat Portland. We never got to see the Bulls take on Portland. Did they? I can't remember. Maybe they did. I know they beat the Sonics. I know they beat the Jazz twice. They beat the Lakers. Anyways, so one of the best teams to not win a championship, where would they be in this era? Remember, I'm basically going from mid-'80s to now. Where would they be? That Suns team now would be NBA champs. But Charles Barkley had the very unfortunate luck of going against, like so many people did. We talked about it before, Michael Jordan, and that Bulls team was just so dang good. So if you take that, after that, let's just go, forget it. Jordan and the Bulls dominated the next 3 years. Rightfully so, deserved it, best team. Now let's get to Jordan going away. The Rockets won back-to-back championships. Do I think that Rocket team is worthy, maybe say the Pistons? I would say so. If you said right now, if I had that healthy Pistons team, and we said how good they are, nothing against them, but that Rockets team was really good too. But who did they beat? Right? I did say the Pistons, they had one championship where the Laker was half staff. They weren't even the same Lakers. But they still had to get past the Celtics. They still had to get there. And then the Rockets didn't have to go against Jordan. It would have been great. I don't live in what if. So this is not a what if. I'm just saying it would have been great. Not if. It would have been great had Jordan not had his dad pass away. Obviously, I'm not saying that, but had he could have stayed. Because I got in a discussion with someone on our channel. Could he have done 8 in a row? The mental toll, right? The physical. Would he also, the steam runs out. I know as competitive as he is, I think he needed that break, because I just don't think you can maintain that for so long. No one has, in a sport, to where maybe they get 4, and after 5 he just gets, he gets tired. Maybe he gets injured. Maybe he gets a little burned out. And other teams are nipping, they're chasing, and that's kind of like we saw with the Lakers and the Celtics and the Pistons, the step-up point. And could that have happened? I don't know. I wish Jordan could have stayed, and we could have maybe seen 8 in a row, maybe 7 out of 8 years, something crazy, but 6 out of 8 is still good. So the Rockets, yeah, I might say they are. If I had I would put them above that Piston team. Let me know in the comments if you would as well. Because remember, they got big shot Robert Horry. They had Akeem Olajuwon. They didn't even have Drexler the first year, but when Drexler was there, still very serviceable and good player. Kenny Smith, Maxwell, Sam Cassell. I wanted to say Vernon. Did they have Vernon Maxwell? I can't remember if he was still there. I think he was there. I thought he played a pretty good series against the Knicks when they beat Patrick Ewing. We'll get to them in a second. But yeah, I would put that Rocket team above the Pistons. So as of this point, we got. Let's see. I want to put the Lakers, Celtics, and Bulls to side. So we're really just discussing 2 teams: the Rockets and then the Pistons. So we go Pistons 5, Rockets 4. The other 3 we'll get to. Now Jordan comes back. It's not even a contest. I mean, you could throw any team in the West. It does not matter at this point. I know Charles Barkley joined the Rockets. And remember, it was like, oh, that was later. But you had Barkley. You had, was that later? I think that was later, yeah, when he joined with Scottie Pippen, and they were on the way out. Yeah, who cares? Scratch that. So let's get to Jordan and the amazing Bulls team. When he came back and lost to the Magic, I mentioned in a previous video, it was because they had no power forward, right? Grant was on Magic, and it was just their time, and I just think the Bulls were just a few bullets short of a full gun. And then they reloaded, and you couldn't have asked for a better player. Dennis Rodman is probably one of my top 10 all-time favorite players. Doesn't have to be the best. He's just one of my all-time favorite. I actually had a Rodman 91 jersey. Loved it. The thing that was great about Rodman is that he was so good at what he did, and if you had him when he was with the Spurs, they would rely on him for scoring with him and Robinson, and their personalities clash. But when he was on the Spurs, man, best rebounder of all time, in my opinion. Defensive player constantly. He was so good defensively, and he was such a pest. He really could get at you. He was just Bad Boys from the Pistons, and he carried that over to the Bulls. And then he had the Wesley Snipes, Simon Phoenix hair, and yeah, that team was like the Beatles. I mean, we thought the Heat were big when they had LeBron there, and they were calling them the Heatles. That was nothing. I mean, that Bulls team was must-watch TV. Everything, led every night on SportsCenter. I wish they would have won 82-0. You know, I'm going to do a video eventually. I want to go back and let's talk about the 9 teams that beat them and how. How did that even happen? Because you're like, who missed what game? What went on with there? Was it a back-to-back, 3 games in 4 days? Because there is no team that should have beat that team. But Dennis Rodman, he said, hey, I'm on this Bulls team. I got Pippen. I got one of the greatest players of all time, if not, in his opinion, the greatest, Jordan. They still had, I think they had Kukoc. Who else did they have? Steve Kerr. I mean, they had Luke Longley. Or was it Will Perdue? Either way, they had such a good offense and enough players to do everything that Rodman just comes in and goes, hey man, I'm just going to grab rebounds and I'm going to kick it out. I mean, the only offensive play I can remember, let me know in the comments if you do too, is he did drain a 3. There was one game he was left wide open, and that's when guys like him weren't shooting 3s. It wasn't like Giannis nowadays. And he drained a 3, and I remember going, oh my gosh, Rodman scored a 3. You know, you just didn't see that. But that Bulls team was so fun. Let's just save the suspense. That's number 1. That is the 72 win team is the greatest team that I've ever seen. I thought it was that year that they first got there when they were all together. Correct me if I'm wrong. It could have been the next year, but I thought that was the 72 year, the first year with Rodman. The hunger Jordan had, by being gone for 2 seasons or a season and a half, being gone that time, that fuel was burning in him, and you could see it. And when he lost, watch out NBA. And he did take over for the next 3 years. That's so dominant, and that team was so good. And Rodman just did his job well. Pippen, lock-up defender. You know, I showed in the other one the stats that in their 6 championship runs, Jordan had better points per game, and I want to say a better shooting percent, but everything else, Pippen led. Pippen led in rebounds. Pippen led in steals. Pippen led in blocks. Pippen led in assists. He beat Jordan in all those categories. That's how good he was, and I think sometimes people forget, and that's one of the reasons I think Pippen was upset. He gets put on the back burner when he was just as important. You pull him off, that is not a 72-win team, right? You need Jordan. They don't win a chip. They don't. He's not like Reggie Miller or anything like that. He is one of the greatest of all times, if not the greatest player. But you needed him on that team. So we'll just put them at the top. The next 2 years, even those 2 teams, they're still, to me, they're all one. Remember, we're not categorizing by season like Jordan did on the video he did with the rings. We're not categorizing it like that. We're just saying that era, that team. So they're number 1. Those 3, the best team was that 72-win team. Now, as we get after that and we get to the next era, I know this video is going long, but I can just keep talking. As we get to the next era, we sit there and we see that what comes next after they're gone? Shaq and Kobe. Actually, you know what? I'm going to stop. This is the end of part 1. If it gets enough views, a lot of likes, comments, I will make part 2 as we break down who are possible the best team. Number 1 we know is the Bulls. We got Pistons might get bumped off as we start talking about the Lakers. Even the Rockets, they're at 4 and 5 or 5 and 4 now. We got Lakers and Celtics still sitting there waiting. And so, yeah. And even the first Bulls team, is that better than the other guys? So we got more to cover. We'll break it down. This is exciting and fun. I really like going into this because they've been some amazing teams in the NBA, and we'll try to prove Jordan's point or disprove it. I don't think we can. I think he's right, but it's still fun talking about it. So leave a like, subscribe. Still look for more. I got videos up from fantasy football. I have shorts talking about fantasy football and other sports topics going on. Thanks, guys, for watching. Talk to you guys later. We will have part 2 eventually. Peace.